Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Department of Labor's National Disability Employment Awareness Month event titled Good Jobs Changes Lives, Helping Disabled Workers Get Ahead. This NDEAM event is being supported by DOL's Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP. I'm Lou Orsley, and my pronouns are he, him. As ODEP's Director of Employer and Workplace Policy, I'm very excited to be your moderator for today's program. I'm a white male in my mid-60s with short gray hair and beard, black round glasses, a blue suit, red, white, and blue tie, appropriate for DC, of course, with a white shirt. This event is being recorded and transcribed and will be posted to the landing page once captioned. We have several accessibility features for today's webcast to ensure access for everyone. All images will be described and speakers will provide a visual description when they speak. We also have American Sign Language and live cart captioning. Our interpreters will be spotlighted on the screen. They include Erin Lappin and Hope Deal. Jane Conkle is our cart writer for today. You can pin Jill and Hope, our interpreters, by selecting the three dots to the right of their name and then select Pin for Me. The link to the cart captioning can be found on the event landing page and in the email you received as an attendee. Please note that you can access the full bio of speakers and panelists as well as slides from today's event on the landing page. If you have any technical difficulties or any questions about accessibility during the event, please email odep-event@dol.gov. Again, odep-event@dol.gov. Staff members are standing by to help you. This afternoon, I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing Assistant Secretary Williams, who will provide our welcome. Assistant Secretary Williams advises the Secretary of Labor on how the department's policies and programs impact the employment of people with disabilities. As such, she leads the Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, which works with employers at all levels of government to promote evidence-based policy for improving employment opportunities and outcomes for people with disabilities. Assistant Secretary Williams, please take the stage.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Lou, and it is an honor to provide the welcome for this celebration of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, or NDEAM. As you heard, my name is Taryn Williams, and I have the privilege of serving as Assistant Secretary of Labor for Disability Employment Policy here at the U.S. Department of Labor. My pronouns are she, her, and for a visual description, I am a Black woman, and I'm wearing a navy blue sweater and a blue floral scarf. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to open this NDEAM event and to share the work of the administration, the Department of Labor, and ODEP. ODEP was established by Congress a little more than 20 years ago to do just what we are doing today, which is facilitating greater collaboration across policies, programs, and agencies to promote employment opportunities for people with disabilities. ODEP is the only non-regulatory federal agency that coordinates with employers and all levels of government to increase workplace success for people with disabilities. And during NDEAM, we celebrate workers with disabilities, their contributions, their talent, and the perspective that they bring to America's workplaces and economy. NDEAM officially takes place in October, but we are committed to upholding its message all year long to ensure that disabled workers have access to good jobs every month of every year. And that is truly the spirit behind the 2024 NDEAM theme, Access to Good Jobs for All. This theme speaks to our commitment and mission to two equally important issues: expanding the number of employment opportunities for people with disabilities and expanding the quality of those opportunities. This was demonstrated by the Biden-Harris administration's recent Good Jobs executive order. This executive order, EO, promotes strong labor standards such as family sustaining wages, workplace safety, and the free and fair opportunity to join a union. It also encourages agencies to implement these standards through their Investing in America programs. The EO directs federal projects to incentivize both equity and access to life-changing benefits, creating new paths for communities that have been left behind to access benefits like childcare, healthcare, and retirement for the first time. To support this year's NDEAM theme, ODAP recently released Helping Workers with Disabilities Get Ahead Through Good Jobs, a toolkit of practical strategies. This tool was developed for businesses employing workers in the construction, manufacturing, and clean energy industries to support employers in hiring disabled workers into family-sustaining, safe, and affirming jobs. The toolkit shares what we know, that people with disabilities enrich our communities and our workplaces, and that through competitive integrated employment, disabled workers can receive the fair wages and benefits in integrated environments, working alongside their non-disabled peers. It's now up to us to deliver on its promise of full inclusion. Let's exemplify President Biden's proclamation on ending for 2024 by honoring the incredible contributions of disabled Americans to our country. And I want to thank all of our panelists today for your partnership, and I so look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Williams, for your welcoming remarks, but also for leading our great work to ensure that people with disabilities have the independence and the dignity that comes with having a good job. Appreciate your leadership. Now, let me introduce Emlyn Bottomley. Emlyn is a policy analyst at the Department of Labor's Good Jobs Initiative, where he helps coordinate cross-governmental efforts to promote equitable and high-quality jobs in federal investments. Emlyn is joining us today to provide background on the Department of Labor's Good Jobs Alliance and DOL's work with other funding agencies to ensure workers from historically underrepresented communities, including those people with disabilities, are given the opportunity to work in industries receiving the more than $2 trillion in federal investments. Take it away, Emlyn.
Thanks, Lou, and thanks to everyone who's joining us today for this conversation. It's an honor to be here and to follow Assistant Secretary Williams. My name is Emlyn Bottomley, and I work with the Department of Labor's Good Jobs Initiative. I'm a white man with medium-length brown hair, wearing a white shirt and a navy blue jacket. I use he, him pronouns. Announced in January 2022, the Good Jobs Initiative is a cross-Department of Labor and cross-federal government effort to ensure that federal investments in infrastructure, clean energy, and advanced manufacturing create access to good union jobs free from discrimination and harassment for all working people, including workers with disabilities. Coordinated by the Department of Labor, the Good Jobs Initiative makes work better in three main ways. The first is money. We work with federal agencies to ensure that the Biden-Harris administration's generational investments require, prioritize, and encourage applicants to commit to labor standards and invest in high-road workforce development programs. The second is through partnerships. We help workers and their representatives, employers, and government turn jobs into good jobs by delivering critical information on labor standards, connecting stakeholders, and highlighting promising practices. One way we do this is through supporting the Good Jobs Alliance, a group of 8 locations where the Department of Labor is working closely with state and local government, community stakeholders, and other federal partners to ensure that federal investments create good jobs. These cities include Atlanta, Birmingham, Charlotte, Detroit, Las Vegas, Newport News, Phoenix, and Pittsburgh. If you would like to learn more or get involved with the Good Jobs Alliance, I recommend that you reach out to Lou after this presentation. And finally, we build tools. We create resources that make all this work easier, including by defining and promoting good jobs and growing the number of pathways to those jobs. Together with the Department of Commerce, we have developed shared good jobs principles, which outline the essential elements of a good job. This slide, titled The Good Jobs Initiative, displays a graphic labeled Job Quality on the left with branches to the 8 good jobs principles on the right. These principles include equitable recruitment and hiring practices, family-sustaining benefits that promote economic security and mobility, diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible workplaces where all workers are respected and treated fairly, a workplace that empowers workers to join or form a union and contribute to decisions about their work, job security and safety and healthy working conditions, an organizational culture that values and respects workers and empowers everyone to make meaningful contributions, a stable living wage that is fair, transparent, and increases with skills and experience, and finally, work that provides equitable opportunities to develop skills and progress on a career pathway. Together, these principles create a shared understanding of job quality that is universally applicable regardless of abilities or background. Next slide, please. To turn these principles into good jobs, we partner with federal agencies, including the Departments of Transportation, Energy, Commerce, Interior, and the Environmental Protection Agency and General Services Administration. Together, we have incentivized equitable workforce development strategies and good jobs policies in over $250 billion of grant funding. This means that across a broad range of federal assistance programs, applicants that commit to investing in workforce development, paying family-sustaining wages, hiring locally, and implementing other good jobs practices and policies are, all else being equal, more likely to receive federal funding. As Assistant Secretary Williams mentioned, the Good Jobs Executive Order makes much of this the official policy of the federal government. However, a lot of this work has been going on since the first days of this administration, and you'll learn more about that today. This slide, titled From Good Jobs Principles to Good Jobs, spotlights examples of job quality tools. In a bracket, there's a list of items that include supportive services, registered apprenticeship utilization requirements, local and economic hiring objectives, workplace health and safety plans, project labor agreements, prevailing wage requirements, labor peace and union neutrality, and commitment to participate in the mega construction project program. Links to a checklist and example language are at the bottom of the slide. While all the policy levers listed here benefit workers with disabilities, and many disproportionately benefit workers with disabilities, today I will talk specifically about supportive services, project labor agreements, and the mega construction project program. These items are highlighted on the slide. Supportive services are services that are necessary to enable an individual to successfully participate in and complete training or access and retain employment. Supportive services often include assistance with childcare and dependent care, transportation, housing, and linkages to community services. For workers with disabilities, supportive services might also include a job coach, a specialist in customizing jobs, or a liaison between the employer and employee's support team. Many federal assistance programs allow grantees to use federal dollars to fund supportive services and may prioritize applicants for funding that commit to doing so. Another powerful tool that can benefit workers of all abilities employed in the construction industry are project labor agreements, also known as PLAs. PLAs are a pre-hire collective bargaining agreement used in the construction industry, negotiated between one or more construction unions and one or more construction employers that establish the terms and conditions of employment for a specific construction project. Because PLAs can include any number of unique terms to help parties achieve their objectives, they can be used to ensure equal employment opportunity, create policies that uplift underserved workers, and redress historic and current inequities, where the parties agree to do so. PLAs can effectively establish and maintain diverse workforces and partnerships by establishing goals for hiring local community members, economically disadvantaged workers on projects, or workers from other underrepresented communities, including workers with disabilities. PLAs can also set up monitoring bodies to track progress on these goals and ensure best efforts are made to meet them. PLAs can also institute equity plans and implement strategic recruitment policies for underrepresented workers, including those from the disability community. And finally, I'd like to highlight the work that the Department of Labor's Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, or OFCCP, is leading to ensure that jobs are accessible through their mega construction project program. Under Executive Order 11246, all contractors and subcontractors which hold any federal or federally assisted construction contract in excess of $10,000 are required to take affirmative steps to meet goals regarding the percentage of construction project work hours being performed by women and people of color. OFCCP also has an aspirational goal that 7% of all federal contractors' workforce should consist of qualified individuals with disabilities for both supply and service and federal direct construction projects. OFCCP's mega project program has long fostered equal employment opportunity in the construction trades by focusing on large-scale construction projects that have the greatest potential to make a positive economic difference in a community. On a mega project, OFCCP conducts outreach and engages with prime contractors to regularly convene equal employment opportunity, or EEO, committees comprised of a broad range of stakeholders. The EEO committee identifies available employment opportunities, works to improve recruitment, and strives to remove barriers to recruitment and hiring for applicants from underrepresented communities. Many of the programs funded through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act, and CHIPS and Science Act require awardees to participate in this program if selected through a neutral selection process. So with this context in mind, I'd like to hand it back off to Lou to introduce today's panel.
Thank you very much, Emlyn, for setting the stage for today's discussion. Much appreciated. And also your leadership with the Good Jobs Initiative. Emlyn and I work closely on the work being done in the Phoenix, Arizona area. So for our discussion on federal investments, we have a distinguished panel of federal experts, as well as the National Legislative Director from the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. I will just note again that full bios and for the panelists can be found on the event landing page. Panelists, as I call your name, please introduce yourself and provide a visual description. Let's begin with Anupa.
Thank you so much, Lou. My name is Anupa Givargis, and I serve as the Deputy Director for the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. I am delighted to be here with so many of my colleagues across the administration and within the advocacy community. I am a brown woman with longish black hair, wearing a blue blazer and magenta lipstick. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, we'll go to Maya.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here with you all. My name is Maya Goodwin. I am the lead for workforce strategy in the Office of Energy Jobs at the U.S. Department of Energy. I use she, her pronouns and have shoulder-length brown hair and brown eyes. I'm in my 30s and I'm wearing a black jacket and blue collared shirt. The Office of Energy Jobs works across the Department of Energy to embed workforce and job quality priorities into the department's investments and strategies. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Maya. Next, we'll go to Karen.
Good afternoon. So happy to be here. Thank you to Assistant Secretary Williams, and thank you to the Office of Disability and Employment Policy at the Department of Labor. My name is Karen Owens. I am a Senior Policy Advisor at the CHIPS for America Program Office at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I am an African-American woman. I am wearing eyeglasses and a headset today. I have a maroon jacket on with a black and white blouse underneath and a virtual background with the CHIPS, the red, white, and blue CHIPS for America logo in the corner. I go by she, her pronouns. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Karen. Next, we'll go to Paige.
I'm Paige Shevlin. I am the workforce advisor at the U.S. Department of Transportation in the Office of the Secretary. And I use she, her pronouns, and I have long brown curly hair and am wearing some sort of dark blue, blackish top.
Thanks very much, Paige. Next, we'll go to Mike.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Efall. I am the National Legislative Director for the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. I'm a proud fourth-generation railroader. I am a white, middle-aged male with medium short brown hair. I wear glasses. I'm wearing a charcoal gray shirt with a pink shirt and a multi-shade pink and blue tie. And I'm starting to grow my winter beard.
Thanks very much, Mike. Mike and I had good conversations about, he's done some work in southwestern Pennsylvania, where I am from, and my grandfather was a conductor on the Monongahela Railroad, so had some good conversation there. So on the behalf of the Department of Labor and ODEP, I just wanted to say really how grateful we are that all of you have agreed to engage in this important discussion today. This year's National Disability Employment Awareness Month theme, Access to Good Jobs for All, emphasizes our goal to ensure federal investments create opportunities for all disabled workers in good jobs across the country. Good jobs, as Emlyn spoke of earlier, are safe workplaces that pay family-sustaining wages and offer strong civil rights protections. President Biden's Investing in America agenda is creating millions of jobs through implementation of infrastructure programs. And I want to note that these investments are being made at a time when, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there continues to be more than 8 million job openings. Funding from the Investing in America agenda creates new opportunities to expand access to good jobs in key industries for more than 22 million, or 11% of working age people in America who are disabled. And now let's dig in and talk a little bit about these investments. And I'll begin with a multi-part question for our federal agency representatives. The Biden-Harris administration's Investing in America agenda includes historic legislation such as the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. ODEP is engaged in several place-based initiatives throughout the country and keenly aware of the funding awards stemming from the legislation. So to our funding agency panelists, and starting with Maya, what kind of investments are being made? What sort of opportunities are being created by your agency? And can you share an example of where these investments are being made? And again, let's begin with Maya.
Thank you. So the Department of Energy, for most of its history, has heavily focused on advancing research and development to solve energy questions, to move knowledge and technologies in the sector forward. Today, DOE has 17 national laboratories and 40,000 scientists working to solve critical science and technology questions. With the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, DOE is now also deploying clean energy infrastructure at a historic scale. When I say deploying, I mean getting a wide variety of clean energy and energy efficiency technologies into use all across the country, including in areas of the country that have been burdened or left behind by the energy system. This is supporting a wide range of industrial activities. This is catalyzing in many ways an industrial revolution. To name a few examples, this is about making our homes, our schools, our factories, our buildings, our transportation more energy efficient. It's about getting more renewable and zero carbon energy sources onto the grid and making the grid more resilient and secure, having more types of energy storage. It's about supporting the development of factories to manufacture critical parts of clean energy supply chains here in the US. These are just a subset of the types of industrial activities the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act are supporting in clean energy. In terms of funding, there's a tremendous amount of public and private investment stemming from these laws. We anticipate and are seeing a real increase in job creation as a result. In terms of public funding, DOE is administering nearly $100 billion in grants through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the IRA. There's also $350 billion in new loan authority and guarantees to be dispersed by DOE's Loan Programs Office. There's also an additional possible hundreds of billions of dollars in tax credits related to clean energy investments that are available through the IRA. All of this is spurring a tremendous amount of private investment too. So far, these investments have driven over $500 billion in announced investments nationwide, supporting at least 400,000 good-paying jobs. We're in the early stages of the job growth we anticipate from the full extent of these laws, but we are seeing these investments already create a lot of clean energy jobs, including good quality union jobs. In 2023, clean energy jobs grew at a rate of 4.9%, which is more than twice as large as that for the rest of the energy sector and the US economy overall. Unionization rates in clean energy grew to their highest level yet, driven by large increases in construction and utility employment. To see more about where these investments are happening, I recommend looking at energy.gov/invest, where you can use a map that shows private and federal investments announced across different energy areas. Thank you.
Maya, very heartening and very, very exciting. Thanks very much. Karen, same question. Again, as a reminder, what kind of investments are being made? What are the opportunities being created? And can you share an example of an investment being made? Thanks.
Thank you, Lou. Yes. So over 2 years ago, President Biden signed the Bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act of 2022. unleashing a once-in-a-generation $52.7 billion of investment to usher in a new era of semiconductor manufacturing in the United States, and bringing with it a revitalized domestic supply chain, good-paying jobs, and investments in the industries of the future. So since then, the CHIPS for America office has been focused on delivering on these results for the American people through investing in projects critical to the United States economic and national security, securing and extending U.S. technology leadership, and protecting American taxpayers. So what have we done to do that? We have announced $36 billion in proposed direct funding for over 32 projects across 20 states. You can go to chips.gov, and we have a map on our website to see where those 20 states are. This 36 billion in direct funding has unlocked over $400 billion in public and private investment. We have supported the estimated creation of 125,000 manufacturing and construction jobs. And then we have proposed over $8 billion in research and development initiatives, including $5 billion alone in the National Semiconductor Technology Center. So the proposals that we have fielded from the CHIPS and Science Act have proposed over $130 million in CHIPS metrology projects, which is basically the measurement instruments. And so CHIPS for America is a core part of President Biden's Investing in America's agenda. The United States has become a magnet, quite honestly, for private sector investments in semiconductor manufacturing, innovation, and with semiconductor companies committing over $300 billion to build and operate fabs here on American soil in the United States. So just really quickly, in terms of promoting good jobs and closing the skill gap, the CHIPS for America program is making investments in workforce development strategies that will help prepare and support Americans for jobs in semiconductor and construction industries, strengthening the pipeline of American workforce talent. And we believe that includes Americans, people with disabilities. And so with that, I will hand it back over to you, Lou.
Thanks very much, Karen. And we're seeing some of these investments. Emlyn and I, again, are working on the place-based strategy, DOL, working in the Phoenix area. And we're certainly seeing the microprocessors, there will be plants, and then there will be workers that are retrained for the microprocessing work itself. So very, very, very exciting once again. Next, we'll go to Paige.
Great, thank you. DOT has been implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was passed in 2021. And that law provides about $650 billion to the U.S. Department of Transportation for various programs. A lot of that funding is going directly to state DOTs. It's about half of the funding. So it's really important to point out that a lot of that is going to state DOTs, and state DOTs I should not use acronyms. They're just state highway agencies, state departments of transportation, and they really maintain the control over how that funding gets spent. But we can help provide technical assistance and guidance and ideas about how they can use that funding, including how they can use it to support workforce. We also have a high number of competitive grant programs within that $650 billion. Again, we have about $125 billion that goes to competitive grant programs. Those grant programs cover all the different modes of transportation, including highway projects, but also transit projects, rail projects, and port projects, and even pipelines. There's many different agencies across DOT, and they're all implementing programs from the infrastructure law, which means that there's lots of job opportunities being created from these different programs. The majority of the jobs being created are going to be construction jobs because the funding is largely for capital construction. But we do also have funding that is creating long-term operations job. And I'm really glad that Mike is here today because certainly, we are creating jobs in the rail sector through our expansion of the Northeast Corridor, as well as our funding of projects like Brightline West, which will be the high-speed rail from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. So lots of exciting projects in rail, and then also transit that are increasing the need for transit operators and transit mechanics. And then again, there's a wide variety of opportunities at our ports and also in the airline sector, which I did not mention the airline sector. So many agencies at the U.S. Department of Transportation that are implementing the infrastructure law. And just to provide an example that I think really ties a lot of what we've all been talking about, we have a project that we're funding in outside of San Diego, the Otay Mesa bridge project, which is a port of entry project. That is also a designated mega project, as Emlyn was talking about the Department of Labor's mega project program. So that project will be receiving compliance assistance on meeting equal employment opportunity goals. And it's also a project that that has an attached pre-apprenticeship program where graduates of the pre-apprenticeship program are preferenced for hiring on the project. So the goal of that in that project is that 20% of the apprentices come from a pre-apprenticeship program that is being funded in part through the California Department of Transportation. So it's just one of the types of examples that shows how we can kind of bring together funding from the Department of Transportation, some of the Department of Labor's compliance assistance programs, as well as state funding to support workforce goals.
Thank you very much, Paige. So other members of our team are working on the Brightline West project, right? Connecting Las Vegas and Southern California. And I understand that's the first true high-speed passenger rail in the nation. So again, not to overuse the word, but just kind of very exciting. Also, it's wonderful to hear of the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship work, because as we know, that's one of the most effective pathways really for people with disabilities into these jobs. I know one of the things that we're working on is there is curriculum out there that is used in pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, and we hope to impact and influence that to ensure those curricula are accessible for people with disabilities. So again, you could see our role in all of these processes. So next, let's turn over to our colleague at the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. Anupa, can you tell us a little bit about OFCCP's mega construction project program? My understanding is that it's developed to foster equal opportunity in the construction trades workforce of federal contractors and subcontractors on these very large federal construction projects. So can you just provide an overview of what that really entails?
Sure. Thank you so much, Lou. So for background, OFCCP is a civil rights agency within labor. We have jurisdiction over federal contractors, which employ 1/5 of the American workforce. Big picture, our role is to enforce laws to ensure companies doing business with the federal government do not engage in unlawful discrimination, and that they comply with requirements to take affirmative actions to ensure that all qualified applicants and employees, including individuals with disabilities, have equal employment opportunities in the workplace. As Emlyn and Paige mentioned, the Mega Project Program is a more than 30-year-old initiative within OFCCP's broader construction program. Now, with this administration's historic investment in America's infrastructure, we relaunched the program in March of 2023.
Now, there are 3 criteria for projects eligible for designation as a mega project. These projects must be valued at $35 million or more in funding, funded at least partially with federal dollars, and expected to last for more than 1 year. Then we work with other federal agencies such as USDOT to identify eligible federal and federally assisted construction projects where construction has not yet started. From that pool of projects, we use a neutral criteria to identify projects to participate in the mega project program. To date, we have identified 40 projects in 26 states across the country. It's pretty incredible. Now, the goal of these projects is really about equal opportunity. It's to ensure there's a diverse pool of qualified workers, including women, people of color, veterans, and individuals with disabilities available for these family-sustaining jobs. The goal is also to promote equitable hiring and fair workplace practices by federal construction contractors by providing all contractors on the project with the assistance they need to comply with OFCCP regulations. So how do we make this happen? One way we make it happen is that we work with the prime contractor to form an equal employment opportunity or EEO committee that meets regularly for the entire duration of the mega project. That committee is made up of subcontractors, unions, community-based organizations, pre-apprenticeship programs, state and local workforce boards, American Job Centers, community and technical colleges, and other community groups. Making sure that people with disabilities are included in these projects are tangible actions that EEO committees can take to further disability inclusion in the mega projects. So if you're listening and you're a disability recruitment source, workforce development group, or a community-based or trade organization, reach out to your local OFCCP office to attend EEO committee meetings and help develop solutions to remove recruitment and hiring barriers for individuals with disabilities. And if you're a civil rights organization, federal work protection agency, or any other federal, state, or local agency, leverage your relationships in the community to increase the exposure of the mega projects to that community, thereby connecting disabled workers to these opportunities. And you can find a lot more information about the mega projects on our website. Back to you, Lou.
Thanks very much, Anupa. And for those of you who are federal contractors and you're looking for resources to hire, retain, and advance people with disabilities, on the landing page, there are a number of resources, but I also want to just alert you that there are dozens of best practices for hiring people with disabilities at askearn.org at our Section 503 portal. So next, let's turn to Mike. Let's talk about the union contributions in all of this. We know again that the Good Jobs principles includes unionization and looking really at unions and supporting these pathways and supporting people from historically underrepresented communities in entering the workforce. And we're really grateful for that work. So my question is, so again, we know that unions are heavily involved in the projects, and they're often integral to the investments in America, investments that are being made. Can you tell us a little more about the labor management perspective? And can you talk about how the work in the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen and how unions really support these good jobs?
Yeah,
So
thanks,
I'll turn
Lou.
it to
That's a
Mike.
great Thank you, Lou. That's a great question. I appreciate it. And it's really great hearing about all of the DEIA stuff. I suffer from multiple sclerosis myself. So this is a big deal coming around the corner compared to what it was just a short while ago. But answering your question, unions are essential, Lou, to the success of the Good Jobs framework, particularly in the context of the Investing in America initiative. Our role is to advocate for the fair treatment, compensation, and well-being of workers while ensuring that the principles of good jobs are implemented effectively. Here's how unions like ours support each of the key areas of this framework. Number one, unions push for inclusive hiring practices, prioritizing skills and experience while ensuring access for underserved communities. Through collective bargaining, we secure essential benefits like health insurance, pensions, and paid leave, providing economic security to workers and their families. Unions advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workplace, working to eliminate barriers and ensure fair opportunities for all. Unions give workers a collective voice through bargaining and representation, allowing them to advocate for their rights and improve their working conditions. And unions fight for job stability, safe working conditions, fair hours, and protections against arbitrary discipline or unsafe technologies. We foster respectful workplace cultures where workers' contributions are valued, ensuring meaningful engagement between leadership and employees. Unions negotiate for fair wages. We fight for wage transparency and equity, ensuring workers are compensated fairly for their skills and their labor. We offer training programs and we work with employers to create pathways for career growth, ensuring that workers have the access to opportunities for advancement. So, in summary, unions like the BRS are vital partners in ensuring that workers benefit from the Good Jobs framework. We advocate for fair wages, equitable treatment, safe working conditions, and opportunities for career advancement, all of which contribute to a more just and inclusive economy. So I'll turn it back to you, Lou. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Mike. We can certainly understand then all the contributions really, and the linkages. You know, it really takes all of this to do this work, and it's really good that we have so many partners and that we are really developing these pathways, and that it's a consistent pathway. I think we all recognize again, you know, the pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeships, and how important they are to historically underrepresented communities. So appreciate the union perspective and the union's contribution for creating those pathways. So next, let's go to Paige, Maya, and Karen. Again, a question for our funding agencies, and this is really a two-part question. So first of all, what do you see are the opportunities for workers from historically underrepresented communities to find jobs in advanced manufacturing, energy, or transportation? And then the second part of that question is, what kind of equity commitments are being built into the investments to ensure that people with disability, as well as others from historically underrepresented communities, are being included in the workforce? And let's start with Paige this time.
Yes, happy to start. I might start with your second question first.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, let me explain how we're putting an emphasis on job quality and inclusion in all of our programs. I mentioned earlier that 125 billion in competitive funding. Every single program, competitive grant program, has a selection criteria is what we would call it, but basically a way for applicants to be considered more highly if they address how they are creating good paying jobs with free and fair choice to join a union, and how they are investing in high quality workforce programs, including primarily registered apprenticeship. And then the third area that we have a big focus on is the use of economic hiring preferences. And I do want to mention that it's a little bit specific to DOT because it's something that was allowable in the bipartisan infrastructure law. But I think that hiring preferences are a really important way to bring in underrepresented populations. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that I have not seen a construction project yet where there is a high representation of traditionally, underrepresented populations without hiring goals or preferences. So I think those hiring goals and preferences are extremely important, and we have been encouraging them very highly at USDOT in all of those competitive grants. We have gone from a small pilot program where there were 16 projects that were allowed to use economic hiring preferences to having economic hiring preferences on hundreds of projects across every single mode of transportation. I'll give my favorite example, which is the Frederick Douglass Tunnel project, the Amtrak project in Baltimore. We worked on that project as part of the White House Workforce Hub in Baltimore, and Amtrak committed to its first ever local hire agreement to require that 50% of the apprentices on that project come from disadvantaged zip codes in Baltimore. The Baltimore DC building trades were a fantastic partner in that. And I just want to emphasize that pretty much all of those local hire preferences are on union projects, right? And so I really want to emphasize what Mike said about the role of unions in supporting inclusion in the workforce, and especially construction unions where they, are funding and operating these pre-apprenticeship programs. So our competitive grants are emphasizing, just to recap, project labor agreements, apprenticeship, local hire. Those are the main areas that we're looking at, and we have seen progress across all of our grant programs on having those sorts of provisions among the award winners. And I think that creates the opportunity that, to your first question about, the opportunity for people with disabilities to participate in these projects. We often see that people with disabilities are the intersections with other underrepresented populations, right? And so I think it's really important to note that even though these economic hiring preferences cannot specifically call out people with disabilities, that would be against the law. I'm not a lawyer, but someone else can maybe explain that. So we can't specifically call out people with disabilities, but they can call out populations that intersect with disabilities, including, for example, people who are reentering from the justice system, right? Many of those individuals have disabilities. People who are on public assistance is another group where we see a lot of that intersection. So I think there are ways to get at particular subpopulations through these local and economic hiring preferences. And I think the community benefits agreement from San Diego is one example of how that can be done. We've certainly seen some other examples across the country as well. And the other thing I want to say about opportunities for people with disabilities is that when we researched this issue at the Department of Transportation, we have a set of recommendations that DOT put out on bringing in underrepresented populations, which includes how to bring in people with disabilities. And one of the biggest issues was that people with disabilities are getting into these pre-apprenticeship programs. They are getting into apprenticeship programs, but they're not captured in the data because they're not necessarily disclosing that in any way, right? But when we asked apprenticeship program sponsors and others about how they're serving people, they were able to tell us about accommodations they're making, and able to talk about people who, maybe, for example, are neurodivergent. But to be honest, there was not an understanding that that is part of, people with disabilities, right?
Yeah.
That is a subgroup. There also, for example, there was a lot of conversation about mental health.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. And we certainly need to have more conversation about this. I think this is going to be one of the outcomes of this event, is to really go dig a little bit deeper into this, because I think that the issues that you're bringing up are certainly important ones. Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Maya. Same questions, equity commitments. What is the Department of Energy looking at in terms of equity commitments?
Awesome. Thank you for the question. So for the $100 billion in grants and the $350 billion in new loans and loan authority that I mentioned earlier, nearly all of that funding has something attached to it called a community benefits plan, or CBP. A community benefits plan is not the same thing as a community benefits agreement, though they are related. When I say the CBP is attached to that funding, I mean that the CBP is a required part of every application for competitive bill and IRA funding opportunities, and stronger plans are going to be more competitive overall for the funding opportunities. As context, again, most of DOE's bill and IRA funding applicants are employers seeking to build, manufacture, upgrade, expand energy infrastructure, or something related to key inputs to that infrastructure. Because of the community benefits plan, these employers have to tell DOE how the project will create and support good quality jobs, how it will make those job opportunities available and accessible to underrepresented and economically disadvantaged populations, among other economic and environmental justice goals. The rationale behind this community benefits plan requirement is that good jobs attract and retain workers. Shared community benefits make projects more successful. All of this contributes to less risky projects and thus less risky investments for the federal government. So an employer that wants to be competitive for a DOE grant or loan had to submit a community benefits plan. These plans have varying types of commitments to support inclusive access to jobs for underrepresented populations. You can view what the commitments were that are publicly available by searching online for community benefits map for demonstration and deployment projects. This is a crucial tool for community members and other leaders to engage effectively with projects and work with them to create pathways and success on the job for underrepresented populations, which includes people with disabilities. In terms of opportunities, DOE also administers many programs specifically focused on workforce development. Many, I often say, I think people will be surprised how many. These grants and financial assistance opportunities are likewise encouraged and incentivized to build in strategies to create access for underrepresented populations and populations with barriers to employment. I suggest looking at, for example, the Industrial Assessment Center program to learn about the numerous workforce programs around the country that supports related to clean energy and manufacturing. There's also a variety of workforce development focused grants that are being administered at the state level by state energy offices. Lastly, I want to mention the American Climate Corps, which is another great opportunity. You can learn about that at acc.gov. The American Climate Corps is an initiative launched in 2023 that set a goal to connect 20,000 young people to training or service opportunities related to climate work to prepare and connect more people to climate careers. DOE is a implementing federal agency to this initiative. On the website, you can explore thousands of opportunities to get into climate work, which includes clean energy. So back to you, Lou.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Maya. Appreciate that. Karen, same question. What's happening at Commerce and what are the opportunities there?
Yeah, so inherent in the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 is clause or section 104 that specifically outlays the outreach and increased participation for economically disadvantaged individuals. Then it goes on to name minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses. And so we believe at the CHIPS for America office that diversity is the United States workforce. The diversity of the United States workforce is one of our best assets. And so through the workforce initiatives and requirements of the CHIPS program, we're building an incredibly skilled, diverse workforce that will be ready to meet the moment. And again, we believe that to be inclusive of persons and communities with disabilities. These manufacturers who are in preliminary memorandum of terms with the U.S. Department of Commerce to receive CHIPS funding, they understand that the workforce needs to be effective to operate these fabrication facilities and manufacturing facilities. And they wouldn't agree to invest in the United States if they didn't think that to build a diverse workforce is necessary. So the CHIPS for America office is targeting into workforce investments for projects in regions where there are multiple semiconductor manufacturers and suppliers that are co-located so that the resources can be utilized across the companies, which will catalyze, we believe, additional private investment and build regional workforce development capacity. So where do we think the opportunities lie? The Department of Commerce has preliminarily identified over 80 community colleges across 22 states that have announced new or expanded semiconductor training programs. And so we believe that that's an opportunity for the disability community to get trained and to get ready for these jobs. In addition, the Chips for America program is making investments in workforce development strategies that will prepare and support Americans for jobs in the semiconductor construction and industries, and strengthen, again, the pipeline for American workforce talent. And I think lastly, a dedicated workforce development fund from the Chips for America program will literally go to awardees, and they will work with local workforce councils and education and training and community-based organizations to create solutions for recruiting talent and training people. And so we hope that all of those robust kind of workforce initiatives will be opportunities for workers in the disability community, and that our investments will yield a return on investments. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you very much, Karen. Yeah, love that clustering approach. I think that's going to be really, really effective for all of the agencies. So appreciate that. Let's go back to Anupa from OFCCP. So what steps can covered federal contractors and subcontractors take to effectively recruit people with disabilities in investing in America-funded projects? To you, Anupa.
Thanks so much, Lou. So one of the laws that OFCCP enforces is Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, or Section 503. Now, Section 503 has two main purposes. First, it prohibits employment discrimination against applicants and employees based on disability. And second, it requires covered contractors and subcontractors to take affirmative action to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities. Broadly speaking, Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act applies to a business with a federal contract of more than $15,000. If the company has at least 50 employees and a single contract of $50,000 or more, it must also develop a Section 503 affirmative action plan. Now, these requirements apply to both supply and service and construction federal contractors and subcontractors who meet these appropriate thresholds. When we think about investing in America-funded projects, it's really important to distinguish that Section 503 only applies to direct construction contracts or subcontracts exceeding $15,000 or more. It does not apply to federally assisted construction contracts. So now we know that individuals with disabilities have the skills and talents to succeed in jobs across all industries, including the construction industry. And OFCCP has a number of resources to help employers take proactive steps to ensure a more inclusive and accessible work environment. Now, some best practices to recruit qualified candidates include accessible online recruitment tools. And as we are in a technology-centric environment where there are accessibility barriers in the application system, contractors can lose out on talented disabled candidates. Other best practices include promoting disability inclusion programs to build a pipeline of qualified candidates. Contractors should consider coordinating with state or local vocational rehabilitation agencies and other disability advocacy organizations. Now, OFCCP also offers an employment resource referral directory, which can help federal contractors and subcontractors find qualified workers.
This directory lists many non-for-profit organizations as references to assist contractors in hiring qualified applicants and fulfill their equal employment opportunity obligations. We also have a number of other resources on our website to help contractors comply with their obligations under Section 503 and help create a more inclusive and accessible environment. So I suggest going to our site and checking those resources out. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Anoop. I appreciate that. Hey, back to Mike. Mike, what kind of jobs are you in? Is the union and you're anticipating being generated by this Investing in America agenda?
Yeah, Lou, thanks. That's another great question. You keep throwing these out. I figure you'll hear from the producers of Jeopardy soon. But the Investing in America agenda is really creating high quality union jobs across key sectors, and it really has a focus on inclusivity. And I'm going to pretty much reiterate what some of the earlier panelists were saying about the jobs coming in. And just about leading the way, unionization in clean energy has surpassed traditional energy. Wind jobs grew by 4.6%, adding 5,700 new positions, while solar, it grew by 5.3%, adding over 18,000 jobs. And the solar sector is also becoming more diverse, with unionized solar jobs up by 13.7%, adding 5,000 roles. Private sector union membership grew by 261,000 workers, with 99,000 new union jobs in manufacturing. Union growth has also been strong in sectors like transportation, warehousing, education, and healthcare. These new roles are increasingly accessible to workers with disabilities. And close to my heart, and as Paige spoke to earlier, the bipartisan infrastructure law has ignited high-speed rail projects, creating tens of thousands of union construction jobs and thousands more in permanent roles. Projects like the California High-Speed Rail Project and Brightline West, they are making the U.S. a leader in high-speed rail and expanding opportunities for disabled workers. So many of these projects and many unions have the project labor agreements and memorandums of understandings that you've heard about with these high-speed rail companies, the agencies, and our partners. So to summarize on the first part of that question is clean energy, manufacturing, and high-speed rail are really driving job creation, with unionized positions offering strong wages and benefits and career stability. So the focus on inclusivity, that ensures that opportunities are accessible to all workers, including those with disabilities. And, at the BRS, we are committed to ensuring that people with disabilities have access to the growing jobs in rail and infrastructure. And here's how we're doing it. We're working with rail employers to design accessible jobs in signaling, construction, and high-speed rail, ensuring that the tools and environments are adaptable for workers with disabilities. We're working through partnerships with workforce development programs, and we offer adaptive training for disabled workers, and ensuring they can access the same high-quality union roles as everyone else. We advocate for inclusive hiring practices in rail, ensuring federal investments like those from the bipartisan infrastructure law include provisions for disability inclusion. And we partner with disability organizations to raise awareness about rail industry opportunities and ensure that the workers get the accommodations they need for success. So in short, the BRS is committed to making sure all workers, including those with disabilities, have access to these new high-quality union jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Very, very inspiring. Really appreciate that. And I think you really just answered the last question for today. We only have a few minutes left. The last question is, I'm just going to ask this of our federal agency colleagues. In one sentence, what's the one thing that you want the audience to take away from today's conversation? And I'll start with Maya.
Sure, thank you. So my sentence has semicolons in it.
Okay.
Be clear about how you can partner. Be proactive in reaching out to firms and education institutions, labor organizations. be clear about what steps different types of stakeholders in your community can take to make their workforces more inclusive of people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maya. Karen, what's your takeaway?
Thank you, Lou. So I think my takeaway, and I didn't mention this earlier, was that the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy is a really great partner, and they've been a really great partner for us. And so I would say the biggest takeaway for the disability community is to reach out to them, because if you're thinking about the semiconductor industry, you're thinking about workforce, any of those questions, we are partners with ODEP, and we'd be happy to have a Zoom call with you to answer your questions. So that's my takeaway. Thank you, Lou.
Great. And we look forward to that continued partnership with all of the agencies. And I know that we have been speaking to others here at Department of Labor, not to preempt anything, but with the Women's Bureau and such, to do some sort of roadshow, whether it be virtual or live, to kind of, get the message out and deepen that message and meet with employers to meet all of our goals of all of our agencies. So really appreciate you mentioning that, Karen, and extending your hand. Anupa, if you had one or two sentences, what do you think everybody should take away from today's conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say out of today's conversation, right, OFCCP is committed to promoting equitable hiring and fair workplace practices by federal construction contractors. So, to the contractor community, if you're looking for resources, reach out to our regional offices, look at our website, and same thing for the disability community. If you have resources that you want to share, reach out to us. We are here to support making the workplace more accessible and inclusive.
Great. Thanks very much. And, just really excited for us all to work together, and so excited for the work that Department of Labor is doing throughout the country, various locations, working on the place-based strategy that we're all engaged in. All very, very exciting work. So Emlyn, Anupa, Maya, Karen, Paige, and Mike, we really appreciate the knowledge and insights that you've shared today. Thanks so much for this very illuminating and again, to use the word inspiring, really inspiring discussion. Before I welcome back Assistant Secretary Williams to close out today's event, I just want to really wish everybody a happy NDEAM. And thank you all for joining us today for this conversation with our federal colleagues and union leaders. We are all important partners in this work. There's $2 trillion out there of infrastructure. We all know that our infrastructure has been underinvested in for decades and decades. And now this is sort of a major, a generational investment in all of our infrastructure, and very excited to do that. As a reminder, ODEP recently released Helping Workers with Disabilities Get Ahead Through Good Jobs, a toolkit of practical strategies that Assistant Secretary Williams had spoken of earlier. You can find that toolkit within the resources section provided on the events landing page. Now, let me welcome back Taryn McKenzie Williams, our Assistant Secretary of Labor for Disability Employment Policy, for closing remarks. I'll turn it over to you, Taryn.
Thank you so much, Lou, for your moderation, and wow. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for such a robust and engaging discussion. I think we could easily spend another hour exploring how the historic investments are creating opportunities for job seekers and workers with disabilities across the country. But I really want to use these few remaining moments to extend a sincere thanks. Foremost, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and for your commitment to advancing employment opportunities for people with disabilities. I also want to extend a thanks to our federal partners, without whom we could not be doing this work, and certainly to our partners outside the government and in communities all across the country. Our shared vision of every worker having access to a good job becomes more of a reality through the work that all of you are doing with your colleagues. Then I would be remiss if I didn't also extend a special thanks to our Department of Labor and ODEP team, including those who are behind the scenes. Today's webinar, the partnerships we highlighted, the resources we shared, the work around the platform to ensure that we could have such a great conversation today. That is the culmination of many weeks and truly months of collaboration. And so I can't say thank you enough to the team inside the Department of Labor. Thank you to our interpreters and captioning. We could not do this without all of you. And I'll maybe close by saying this might be, I suppose, the final week of NDEAM, but I hope it's the beginning of a week of renewed energy and we'd love to hear feedback about the webinar and of course about the tools that we've developed and what our partners shared. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.